All right, so welcome to the After Action Reset. This is our first episode. My name is Steve Geiger. I will be your humble host for the remainder of the After Action reports and episodes that are jumping off. So a little bit about myself, just so everyone kind of has a little bit of background about me. You will get to know me as the episodes progress, but I spent years in specific environments where pressure isn't optional. I was a Marine Corps Force Recon Marine. After that, I did some contracting again, which took me back overseas and put me in a lot of hot spots, so to speak. And currently, I've been law enforcement for the past 11 years. So in essence, a life built around structure, discipline, and honestly, control. I've been married for 21 years. I have 3 gorgeous daughters, one's 17, about to be 17, the other's about to be 15, and the other's about to be 11. And they watch everything that I do, whether I realize it or not. So for the immediate future, most of these podcasts, I'm going to be talking about my experiences and things that I've gone through. Like I said, I have been married for 21 years. And maybe one of these days, I will ask my wife to join me on some of these shows, and we'll kind of get into the whole couples area of mental health and my journey and her journey and things of that nature. So going back to it, like a lot of people who've lived that kind of life I was just talking about, I got really good at functioning under pressure. So this show is about what happens after that. When the so-called mission ends, when the structure fades away, and your system doesn't know how to turn it off. If you have ever felt like that, your mind won't slow down, like you're carrying something you don't talk about, or like you're holding it together, but just barely, you are in the right place. So, that being said, let's get to work. From the outside, my life looked exactly how it was supposed to. I had a phenomenal career. It was structured, and there was a lot of discipline. A family that mattered more to me than anything. On paper, my life, it was solid, right? The kind of life some people might point to and say, yeah, that guy has got it all figured out. And for a long time, I believed that because I was showing up, doing what I was supposed to do, handling responsibilities. A lot of the responsibilities, I would come home and I was active in the house. I was cleaning, vacuuming, doing dishes, making the bed, folding laundry, helping out with dinner. I did it all, right? I did. And then I was providing. I had a great job. We were single family income for the most part. My wife does some part-time stuff from home and obviously contributes a little bit financially. But a big part of kind of where I thought I was coming from in my job as a man in today's world, right, was to provide. And I was performing, like I said, on all levels. My oldest does club volleyball, my middle is a competitive gymnast, and my little one softball, and then they all do dance and events and birthdays. So I was doing it all, right? I was doing it all. And if you asked me how I was doing, I would give the same answer that most people give. Even my kids, I would say I'm good. Another version of what I would say is I'm fine. And I picked this one up in the military. It's an acronym. If you ever hear someone say they're fine, I want you to dig behind it just a little bit. So fine, F, I'm effed up. I, insecure. N, neurotic. And then E is emotional. So next time you ask someone how they're doing and they say I'm fine, maybe that'll bring a little smirk or a little laugh to your mind. But we need to learn to ask deeper questions. Like I'm good is not an answer, right? How are you feeling today? Tell me about your day, the best part. And I always tell my kids, it can't be lunch or recess, right? I want to know something that causes you to reflect and think a little bit. And that's a work in progress, of course. But I'm good. Here's the problem with that answer. You can be doing everything right and still be falling apart underneath it all. So I remember sitting in the house one night, and I'm going to give this specific example a lot because it's very easy for other people to relate to. Some of my other interesting stories I'll get into in later episodes, but this one, I'm going to say this one through several episodes because it's relatable to just about anyone out there. So sitting in the house one night, nothing dramatic is going on. There's no crisis unfolding. There's no chaotic moment, so to speak. Just normal life. My wife is talking. The girls are moving around the house, doing whatever it is they normally do when they're home. I'm sitting there and I'm staring right through it all. Not hearing anything. Not really even feeling much. I'm just there. Physically, I'm present. Mentally, I am somewhere else. And here's the part most people don't understand unless they have been there. I wasn't necessarily sad in that specific moment. There are other moments where I was, but again, later discussions. But for this one, I'm not really feeling sad. I wasn't breaking down. I wasn't falling apart in a way that anyone could point to. If anything, I looked very calm. I looked controlled, even steady, some might say. But internally, I was running hot. Constant tension, I had a short fuse, no patience for anything that felt inefficient, unnecessary, or out of control. Sleep wasn't right. So let me talk about sleep real quick. For the last 11 years, the nature of my job is law enforcement, I sleep on average 3 to 4 hours a night. And I'm not just saying that. Some people say it, but when I say it, I mean it. I'm up at about 2:45, 3 a.m. I start work at 5. I have a 100-mile commute each way. I leave work anywhere from 2 to 4 p.m. depending on what's going on, and that puts me home anywhere from 5 to 6 to 7 if traffic is really bad. I jump right into the whole thing, cleaning, helping out with the wife, trying to, take more of her load off the table. That way I can help out. I do all the stuff when it comes to volleyball, all the pickups, drop-offs, gymnastics, softball. I'm a coach on softball. I participate in daddy-daughter dances, like I said, every year. So I was not getting enough sleep. And we will talk about how imperative and how crucial sleep is to us being healthy. And if we can't get the sleep that we need, some other things that we can do to help build that cushion, so to speak. So my system never fully learned to shut down. And the smallest things, a tone of voice, a question at the wrong time, something not going according to my plan, right, would hit harder than it should. And I'm not talking explosive, but sharp, controlled irritation. The kind that doesn't look like a problem, but slowly starts creating distance. And here's where I'll say something that might hit a little different. I wasn't just dealing with stress. I was also drinking more than I should have been. Now, I'm not talking about falling down drunk every night. I was extremely functional, high functioning. It wasn't even controlled, right? Because there's a saying out there, if you have to control something, then you probably have a problem. But I was extremely high functioning. So what I'm getting at is I was drinking to take the edge off, and sometimes much more. So definitely, I'm not an alcoholic. I am definitely not an alcoholic, right? All right, I'll explain some of those stories later on in the episodes as well. At least that's what I told myself, that I wasn't an alcoholic. So the truth is, I wasn't trying to get drunk. That wasn't the goal. I was trying to get quiet. And when you combine that with a system that's already running hot, you don't fix anything. You just delay the inevitable. And that's where this starts. Not with some big collapse, not with everything falling apart all at once. It starts with small shifts. You get a little shorter, a little more distant, a little less present. You don't notice it at first, but the people around you do. That's why I mentioned kids watch everything. And my wife also notices it. And here's the dangerous part. From the outside, you still look high functioning. You're still performing, still showing up, still getting things done. Which means nobody pulls you aside and says, hey, something's off. Are you okay? Because to them, you're handling it. But inside, you are not. You're managing it. And there's a difference. Managing means you're holding the line, barely. Keeping things together through discipline, structure, and sheer force of will. But there's no margin, no recovery, no real reset. And over time, that catches up to you. And here's something else I didn't understand at the time. When you live like that long enough, it starts to feel normal. That constant edge, that underlying tension, that low-level irritation you can't quite explain. You stop questioning it, and you start building your life around it. You justify it even. This is just how I am. This is what comes with the job. This is what it takes to stay sharp. Any of that sound familiar? And on some level, those statements can be true. But what you don't realize is you're not just staying sharp anymore. You're staying activated all the time. And the longer that goes on, the harder it becomes to tell the difference between who you are and what your system has adapted to. Because at some point, you're not choosing how you respond anymore. Your system is choosing for you. And that's where we need to start. So what we're describing, that feeling of holding it together on the outside while something underneath is constantly running, that's not random. There's an actual structure to it. And once you understand the structure, it stops feeling like chaos and it starts feeling like something you can actually work with. Does this sound like something called maybe acknowledgement? I believe it is. So most people hear words like stress or PTSD and they immediately think in terms of emotion, fear, anxiety, panic, anger, right? But for a lot of high functioning people, especially people who've spent time in environments where control actually matters, that's how it shows up. It shows up as control. It shows up as tension. It shows up as a system that doesn't relax. And again, I keep saying environments. You'll get to know me, as I already said, prior Marine veteran, law enforcement, I get it. But these situations, this feeling, this underlying tension, this stress can be applied to anyone out there. No one is excluded. First responders, military veterans, I get it, right? We're in the mix. But anyone, someone that holds a normal 9-to-5 job, that gets no sleep, that has stressors at home, right? The parents, the mom and the dad, the single family mom, right, who's raising kids and working, right? This applies to anyone and everyone. So this isn't just inclusive to veterans and law enforcement. So what is actually happening is this. Your nervous system has learned through repetition, exposure, and necessity that being on is safer than being off. Not emotionally, physiologically. I need to learn how to talk again. Your body has adapted to operate at a higher baseline. And that adaptation is not a flaw. It's not a character defect. It is a skill. It's the reason you were able to function in those set environments that most people wouldn't last 5 minutes in. It's the reason you can walk into a situation, assess it quickly, and stay composed while other people are reacting instead of pause and then responding. That doesn't come from nowhere. That comes from conditioning. So here's the part nobody really ever explains unless you go and get treatment. Conditioning doesn't come with an off switch. What happens is this. The same system that learned to protect you is the same system that kept you sharp, aware, and responsive. It never gets the message that the threat is actually gone. And when that happens, your baseline shifts. Another word for baseline is our homeostasis. So for podcasts, you can imagine a very bottom, a very top, 0 to 100, in the middle is 50. Our baseline, let's just say, starts at 50. As this stuff starts to weigh on us and we're not getting sleep and we're stressed out and anxiety and we're not dealing with this stuff, our baseline shifts from 50 up here to 100 and then maybe even above 100. And that becomes like our new homeostasis, our new area where we just are surviving and not really living. So instead of moving between on and off, we're always just on or activated all the time. Now, you might not feel this as anxiety. You might not feel it as fear. You might feel it as always scanning, always thinking, always anticipating, always needing to know what's happening next. For example, you walk into a room, you map it. That's for my veterans. You hear a sound, you track it. Veterans, first responders, and actually anyone could be someone who grew up in an abusive family. Something changes and you notice it immediately. People that normally have control issues and high stress, right? They notice this kind of stuff. That's not a problem in the right environment. It's not. It helps you survive. It's an asset. But when that same level of awareness follows you home, it doesn't feel like awareness anymore. It starts to feel like pressure. And the body doesn't know the difference between this is necessary and this is over. All it knows is what it's been trained to do. So now that you've got a system that is constantly asking what's next, what could go wrong, what needs to be controlled, and when there's no real answer to those questions, guess what? Your mind is going to create one for you. That's where overthinking comes from. That's where irritability comes from. That's where the constant low level tension sits. Because the system is doing exactly what it's trained to do: identify problems and then solve them. The issue is there's no problem to solve in that specific moment that we're talking about. So it turns inward. Now, instead of scanning the environment, you start scanning people, listening specifically to conversations, listening or paying attention to their tone, watching their behavior. We start noticing, what did they mean by that? Or why did they say it like that? Or something feels off. And sometimes something is off. But a lot of the time, it's just your system looking for something to lock on to. That's when relationships start to feel harder than they should. Not because you don't care, but because your system is operating like it's still in a high-stakes environment, whatever that specific scenario or upbringing in your life was. Most of us have this type of stuff layered deep in our subconscious. So now layer this on top of fatigue, because running like that all the time, as I said earlier, is expensive. Your body is burning energy constantly. Your mind is processing constantly. Even when you're sitting still, you're not actually resting. How many of you knew that? So when you say, I'm tired all the time, it's not because you're weak. That's not what I'm saying. It's because you're running a system that never fully powers down. And here's where it gets a little more complicated. So stay with me. When you finally do slow down, when you finally sit still, when things get quiet, that's when it hits. Because the moment the external stimulation drops, your internal system is still running at full speed. And that creates a mismatch. Your environment says you're safe. You can relax. But your system says, stay alert. That gap is where discomfort shows up. And most people don't interpret that correctly. They think, I don't like sitting still. I need to stay busy. I function better when I'm moving. But what's actually happening is stillness exposes the fact that your system doesn't know how to come down. So what do? We avoid it. We do things like we try to stay busy. Those of you who work more, overtime, right? You try to stay productive. Okay. Maybe we're obsessively cleaning the house or rearranging the garage, right? You stay in motion. Some of us, right? I like to go to the gym. Some of us maybe overdo it and are gym rats, but to an unhealthy extent. Right. So, and again, that works until it doesn't. Because eventually the system starts looking for relief. And that's where things like alcohol come in. Not as a weakness, not as a character flaw, but as a tool. A fast, effective, temporary way to do something your system doesn't naturally know how to do anymore, which is slow down. And that's why it works so well at first, because it does what you can't. It quiets things. It takes the edge off. It reduces that constant internal pressure. But it doesn't fix the system. It actually bypasses the system. So when the effect eventually wears off after a couple hours, the system is still there. It's still running. It's still activated, so to speak. Which means the next time you feel that same pressure, you reach for the same tool that just gave you temporary relief. And now you're not just dealing with a system that's stuck on. You're layering in a pattern that actually reinforces it. You never actually teach the system how to come down properly. You just keep overriding it. It turns into a vicious cycle, right? I'm sure everyone can understand that. And over time, that gap that we were talking about earlier gets much wider. Your baseline, your baseline stays much higher, and your recovery is very, very low. And you start to feel like, this is just how I am. This is how I'm built, right? Some people even say I'm built different, right? There's an underlying, I think, element that needs to be looked at depending on who's saying it and how you're saying it. But it's not, right? This is how your system adapted over time. And once you understand that, you stop taking it personally. You stop seeing it as a flaw, right? Or a character defect. And you start seeing it for what it actually is. A trained response that hasn't been recalibrated. So what we've talked about so far is not about weakness. I want to get that straight. And it's not about you being broken because you're not broken. And it's not about something being wrong with you, as I said earlier, a flaw or a character defect. That's not the case. It's about a system that has adapted to survive and never got recalibrated. So for the longest time, I was surviving. And then I was told, and it was put into perspective, I wasn't put on this planet to survive. I was put on this planet to live, to experience things, right? That's sort of the mindset that I think we should all kind of get back to. And once you understand that, everything starts to shift. Because if it is a system, guess what? It can be trained. That's the difference. You're not trying to fix yourself. You're learning how to restrain something, or as you were, you're trying to retrain something that's been running one way for a very long time. And that starts with this. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And you start asking, what is my system doing right now? That one little shift changes everything. Because now you're not reacting blindly. You're observing, right? Or as I said earlier, acknowledging. Then you notice, I'm tense right now. My breathing is shallow. I'm scanning. I'm getting irritated faster than I should be for this particular situation. That awareness alone starts creating space and starts to give you a cushion. It's not quite control yet, but space and cushion. And space is where control starts to happen. Now, here's where most people make a mistake. They think the solution is just relax, just calm down, take it easy, right? We've all heard people say that. That doesn't work at face value. You can't talk a system out of doing what it's been trained to do for your entire life. You have to show it something different. And that starts physically. So before you try to change your thoughts, which is important in the long run, before you try to think positive, you change your state. And everything I just said above, right, your thoughts and talking positive, those are important things. What we're talking about specifically right now is changing your state, a physiological control mechanism to help bring us down. So you slow your breathing. You drop your shoulders. You create stillness, even if it's uncomfortable. Has anyone ever heard the term, get comfortable being uncomfortable? And it will be uncomfortable at first, right? Taking some breaths, dropping your shoulders at first, because your system is going to initially resist it because it's not used to it. So it's going to say, this isn't safe. We should be doing something. Stay alert, be on the lookout, right? And this is where discipline comes in. Not the kind of discipline that pushes you harder, right? Like in the gym. We're talking about the kind of discipline that holds you steady. It holds you steady. Stay the course. You sit in that discomfort. Don't escape it. Don't try to override it. You let your system realize nothing bad is happening. And that's how recalibration starts. Not through force, through repetition. And it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need a perfect routine. Something I'll constantly say is we're not looking for perfection, we're looking for progress. You don't need an hour. You need incremental moments throughout the day. 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, where you deliberately bring your system down. And you need this every single day. Because right now, your system is getting reps being on. We need to give it reps being off. That's how this changes, slowly but surely. Same thing, everything else that we've talked about, right? Sleep, movement, structure. These are not optional things. They're not nice to have. These are the foundation of whether your system will learn over time to stabilize itself or whether it stays elevated. And the alcohol piece. We're not going to pretend that that is simple either. But you have to understand what it's doing at the moment when you decide to drink. It's not solving the problem. It's overriding it. It's interrupting it, whatever word you want to put in its place. And if you never build the ability to regulate without it, guess what? You'll stay dependent on it. And that's not judgment, not coming from me. That is definitely not judgment. It's just reality. It's what I've come to learn. And once you see it clearly, you can start making different choices. Not perfect ones, but better ones. And again, that's what we're looking for. Progress, not perfection. And ultimately, that's the goal. Not some version of you that never feels stress again, because we're going to have moments in our life that feel stressful. Not feeling stress ever again, that is not real. The goal is starting to learn how to control. Control over your responses, control over your physical state, control over how you decide to show up, especially when things aren't ideal. Because here's the truth. The system that's making your life harder right now is the same system that made you capable when you needed it to. We're not trying to get rid of that part of it. We're trying to put it back where it belongs, in its place, so it works for you and not against you. And that's what this show is going to do in the long run. We're going to break this down piece by piece. I don't do fluff pieces. This, in my opinion, isn't considered generic advice and pretending. We're not pretending that this is going to be easy. Just real conversations, my stories, my experiences, my opinions on what has worked for me, just trying to pay it forward and help people out there. This stuff actually works. And then we're also going to talk about, sooner or later, what doesn't work. The stuff that, in my opinion, doesn't work. So if you heard something in this message today, if part of this felt familiar, if you recognize yourself in any of it, you're not the only one. Rest assured, you are not the only one. And you're not stuck like this. You've just been running one way for a very long time. We're going to change that, one little piece at a time. If this hits you, you already know it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, we're going to do something about it. I'll see you on the next one.